Walt, Waymo's getting ready to launch commercial service at SFO for the public, but down in Santa Monica, they got an incident they're dealing with, and as some of the critics say, LiDAR didn't bail them out. Meanwhile, Tesla is no longer sexy as they shut down the Model S and the Model X to make room for Optimus the bot, and Uber's inching closer to possibly rebooting ATG, funding Waabi to go and build Robotaxis in addition to trucks. There's a lot to unpack this week, and also Mercedes is there. So where do you want to start?
Well, I think we should start with Waymo, the airports. We've been waiting for this for a while. It's not totally new, right? They had the kiss and fly lot that I love to talk to. Now we're getting, I guess, a little closer to the rental car lot. I don't know where that is relative to the garage that I am willing to walk to get Ubers, which I think is a great facility there. But you and Rich Greenfield, my partner over at Lightshed, would prefer what Uber gets if you're taking a black, which is curbside. So we're getting closer. But do you know where the rental car lot is relative to where you get a typical Uber in that garage?
I have to give Rich the honorary clappy hat. The clappy hat's not coming out today, but I'll give Rich an honorary clappy hat for that because he's right. We do want curbside service. Yes, to go to the rental car, which is commonly referred to as the rack, RAC, you have to take a train. That's right, Walt, 10 minutes. Not only do you have to walk, but you have to get on a train, and it's a pain in the you-know-what. So you got to take a train.
At JFK, it's kind of a little screwed up right now. And one of the terminals that I came into, I had to take a train. It was good because I got past some really bad traffic. But I tend to agree that once you're asking people to get on any type of train or tram or something like that, versus that I think is a pleasant walk to where the Uber garage is, that's kind of a bridge too far. Give us a little inside baseball if you can. You've dealt in these situations before. Like, what is it? How do they get from kiss and fly to the rental car lot, and what's it going to take to get to the where the Uber Lyft garage is, and then ultimately authorization for curbside?
It's going to take a lot of political maneuvering. It's going to take the mayor of San Francisco taking bold action to say, this is what we need because it's good for the tourism economy of San Francisco. If we look back at policy battles, the taxi union, when they were strong, they banned Uber and Lyft from certain parts of the airport. And over time, it's going to take a profound lobbying effort on Waymo's part to be able to overcome that. And then the question is when Waymo starts operating the Uber and Lyft area, if that's what they do, does that cause more tension between Uber and Lyft and Waymo? Because a lot of those rides will probably go to Waymo. So overall, Walt, long-winded way of saying it's going to take an increased lobbying effort on Waymo's part to make it a reality.
Well, I'm actually impressed that in this short period of time, they got from kiss and fly to rental. So congrats on that. Hopefully it's a similar timeline to getting to the lot. And I think, especially in California, where the people of California, Northern California and that Southern, get to experience Waymo on a daily basis, hopefully there'll be more pressure on their politicians or bureaucrats, whoever's making these decisions to get there. And you're right, the downside is for Uber is these are very valuable trips. And I think the potential economic impact to Uber starts to rise when people, start to think about using Waymo for more than just getting around San Francisco, but, more of their regional needs. Those are higher value and greater market share opportunities for Waymo in that market.
And you know what else happened that wasn't discussed a lot this week? Waymo expanded the ODD in the peninsula to go to downtown San Jose. So now you can go from the San Francisco airport to downtown San Jose. So if you and I go out on an Autonomy Markets mission, or you go out on a business trip, you could take Waymo the entire time. That completely changes your journey and gives you a really great experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think in a short period of time, Waymo has really transformed themselves in California from being just kind of in San Fran to more regional. We're going to be out there a couple times in the first half of this year, so I'm looking forward to being able to use these Waymos in that market and that expand. And I think maybe we should think about setting up a tracker where we just look at square mileage overall, where Waymo is in the United States, as kind of a reflection of where their footprint is relative to any of their peers in the marketplace. You'll see like May Mobility or whoever launching in Atlanta, we'll show what that looks like in stark contrast to where Waymo is today in terms of that not square footage, but let's call it square mileage. And by the way, as they expand to London, we're still going to use square mileage.
Yes, we're not going on the meter system there.
The meter system, the metric system.
Listen, Walt, hooked on phonics obviously didn't work for me, so I'm sorry about that one. But you know what would be better? We take the population that lives in those areas and overlay it on that map, and then we'll get a really big understanding of what percentage of the U.S. population Waymo is serving today.
Yeah, for sure. That'll be interesting. Now, you talked about, or we both talked about, getting public support for greater pressure in the airports. The people of Santa Monica don't seem like they support Waymo too much. We've had complaints about their cars beeping because they didn't have anywhere to park, or maybe their back office was not suitable. We have a new incident this week. As far as I can tell, there was a school situation. The Waymo was driving approximately 17 miles per hour. That's what was reported. And a child ran out from behind a car. The Waymo slowed to 6. I actually, in my car this week, drove at 17 miles an hour. It seemed like more than an appropriate speed, in a school type area. So it didn't seem like that's a speed that would be too fast for a school zone. Someone can feel free to correct me and say, oh, the appropriate number is 15. But honestly, the difference between 15 and 17, not much of a difference. And 6, like 6 literally is a number where, again, look at your car. If you have a digital readout, when you get to 6, I'm not even sure most people are getting slower than that before they move out of a stop sign. We've talked about this thing. So I think at the end of the day, my guess is this Waymo performed better than a human. And fortunately, this child was not, seriously injured, which I can't imagine they would be at 6 miles an hour on contact.
And what happened was that this is in the NHTSA report. I just want to highlight this is in the NHTSA report. The child darted out from behind a double parked SUV. A human, me, wouldn't see it. And if you want to look at the National Safety Council statistic database, the percentage of individuals that are distracted on their phone are high. So there is a higher percentage that individual was, if it was a human, would have been going over 17 miles an hour. To put in perspective, the school district where I live for the school zone is 20 miles an hour. And I can't tell you, they have a cop out there with a radar gun every day. Boom, 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 boom. People ignore it. So there is a high likelihood, in my opinion, and there's massive amount of data to back it up, that a human would have caused a tragedy potentially, or a worse situation than the Waymo did.
So it's obvious that the media likes to, write stories about this because it's a robot, whatever, AI. I mean, there was also Zoox had a minor incident in, I think it was San Fran as well, in the Mission. So in California, not in LA, in the Mission, where someone's hand was struck in their 1977 cabriolet or something like that. Again, big headlines in TechCrunch, but minor dust up. Here's the silver lining to our listeners, who I believe are probably mostly pro autonomy and seeing the benefits. This has not changed anything in terms of Waymo's service or other companies' service, right? So you've had these incidents. Thank God they weren't serious. I think, these are not, this hasn't changed the trajectory. This is always the kind of the freak out that people have, does an incident change the trajectory or the willingness of these companies to move forward? Nor has there been, at least not that I'm aware of in Santa Monica, some outcry. I mean, I'm sure there's other, interested parties that will drum up these incidents to try and achieve their goals to slow autonomy for their own benefit. But I think the positive side of this is the consumers have been able to digest this news, in a normal fashion, which is, kind of rare these days, to be honest.
It tells you that the technology is maturing and it's becoming part of the local community. I can't tell you how many former NTSB individuals and board members that I've spoken to and said, we just become numb to death on the roads. And if it was involving a human, we wouldn't be talking about it right now. But this is a positive sign that there hasn't been a major outcry. And it also tells me that the public acceptance of this technology is only growing.
Now, the flip side of this is you can't help but start to question, because of the debates that exist with LiDAR, and frankly, some of the videos that Waymo themselves, Dimitri himself, has presented in terms of why LiDAR is so much better. with an exact example of a human, I think it was a kid actually, from behind a bus that jumped out. Now, in this case, they were describing the LiDAR, I guess, having seen below the bus and didn't have a direct line of sight. But certainly there has been this belief, and certainly tests that have attacked Tesla. Some of them, questionable in how they were run, where they have like a mannequin that they're throwing out in front of the FSD, whatever version that they happen to be using then. But the whole narrative was specifically that LiDAR with this specific incident would be better. And yet, if you look at the literal quote from Waymo, from that release, it says, Waymo said its vehicle, quote, immediately detected the individual as soon as they began to emerge from behind the stopped vehicle. So that's telling you, if they're emerging from the vehicle, then you have sight, right? It is the camera that is seeing, that child see it. So to me, it is, if it doesn't, kind of underscore, yeah, sure, LiDAR for long distances. Like if I'm traveling on a highway doing 70 miles an hour, is LiDAR going to see something 3 miles or 2 miles down the road? Sure, but do I need to see something 3 miles or 2 miles down the road? So in the inner debate that I continue to have, where I agree that LiDAR provides greater information in some scenarios, but does it restrict the ability to create a driving experience that is materially better than a human? How is this one not in the column of shouldn't LiDAR have done better in this situation?
Well, it goes back to the Elon debate where he says the sensors create noise. I'm not saying that's what it is, but LiDAR is not this end-all, be-all miracle drug or miracle sensor that certain individuals make it out to be. Is it a component that does a job? Yes. Is it a component that you need to drive a car? No. N-O spells no. And to give you an example on that, do you know where you can't deploy a LiDAR? We'll play a little game here. Well, where, when you're deploying an autonomous vehicle, can you not use LiDAR? Because it will harm your safety. Where do you think that is?
I have no idea.
You cannot put it in military applications because it gives off pulsing lights and the enemy knows where it is.
Well, thankfully, some people might debate this. We don't have enemies on our streets. I'm not willing to say no, you don't need LiDAR. I think it's not binary, Grayson. There is nuance. There are certain situations where maybe I'm willing to consider that LiDAR, and I think it's a reasonable consideration, is going to do better. The question is does that mean that camera is not enough to save tens of thousands of lives? I don't know. It seems like, we're going down to a path where that's a possibility, and I'm still leaving that option open, but I'm not saying it's no, you definitively don't need it. There's going to be, I think, situations where you do on those edge cases, from my standpoint.
I have an open mind. I'm not forced into one side or another. I own the Tesla, you own a Tesla, and I drive it every day, and it's validating to me that it can be done. And you're right, with specialty applications, of course you probably need LiDAR. But in the day-to-day of what we experience, no, it's been proven that you do not fundamentally need LiDAR.
So I want to throw this thought piece out there to our listeners, which I got, by the way, awesome positive feedback this week. Thank you so much for all the messages that you sent from last week's episode. Appreciate that. But I want to throw this out to our self-appointed experts, which is it possible that, when you think about the added data from the additional sensors that are on a Waymo, including that LiDAR sensor, that the additional processing time that it had to take to taking all these sensors in had an incremental, whatever it is, half a millisecond, quarter millisecond of processing time, that maybe the car would have stopped, that quarter millisecond faster, that would have taken 6 down to 2 in terms of the miles per hour on impact. Now, who knows? Compute's powerful. I don't think Waymo is using NVIDIA. So they're using their own kind of purpose-built. Is theirs better than NVIDIA or faster than NVIDIA? I don't know. But I just know when I have in the LLMs that I use, when I go to thinking mode and it's trying to get more inputs, the answers come back slower. So there seems to be some basic logic in that maybe there is a slight fraction performance differential that might exist when you have more sensors. I don't know. Again, not making a statement, We have a lot of self-appointed experts. Let me know your thoughts on that as a concept. And do you have any thoughts, Grayson?
It is very, very possible. So when you're doing deep research in your LLMs, you're triggering a larger percentage of the database, mostly running on an HD, not an SSD. So there is time. There is a lag on that standpoint. The way that the Waymo system is architected, there could be a lag of a millisecond, half a millisecond. We don't know because Waymo has never made the specs public, but based on the architecture of these models and how they work, you are very right. They're possibly, I'll use the word possibly, could be.
Talking about the LLMs, you're getting access to data centers, right? Massive compute. Remember, these decisions are being done based on the compute that's on the vehicle. They're not relying on the amount of compute that exists elsewhere. So you have some limitation on the compute that's in the car. And again, you're giving it all of this extra data. I don't know. It just stands to reason that additional data would take more time to process. Maybe the answer is like, no, dude, like that incremental processing time is like one, I don't know, what is the smallest measure of time, parsec of whatever. And that's a completely irrelevant statement. But it seems to me that like latency and you know, the tie-in between compute and the ability to handle different amounts of data has some impact.
100%. The question is, what impact? And that's something that maybe Waymo should get more transparent about.
Let's go to Tesla earnings. It kind of validated what I've said on this podcast before in terms of like, does anyone really care about the number of cars they're making? It's all about autonomy. And I guess to a lesser extent, or maybe to a greater extent, robots. And in fact, Tesla is getting rid of models S and X. And why? To focus on autonomy and robots, including an increase in CapEx, which includes some more compute as well as some of the factories to build out this stuff. So, I mean, it's a complete pivot to be like, hey, this is not us about us being an EV company anymore. This is fully, you know, embracing autonomy as the future. Not that that's like a massive revelation, but that's the facts. And we got a new market timeline where you've got a handful of markets, Texas, Arizona, Florida, Nevada, all expected to be delivered in 5 months. What does delivered mean, Grayson? Because, you know, that could mean anything. Let's just put it that way. Why don't you say what you think this means in terms of these markets being launched in the first half of 26?
What it means is that Elon and Tesla, they're not getting their sexy back on. They're moving away from the Justin Timberlake days and they're moving to the robotics days. That's what it says to me at a high level. But the common denominator in the markets that Tesla has announced that they are going to launch for the first half of 2026 are the regulatory environment. Each one of these states, Arizona, Florida, and Texas, has a regulatory environment where Tesla has the ability and they could have the authority, depending on permitting, which I do not see for the record as any potential hiccups, to deploy driver out unsupervised robotaxis and cybercabs will be pending NHTSA regulations and NHTSA approval, but they have a clear path to do this. And I'm not going to speculate on which markets will go unsupervised in that timeline, but I'm just saying the facts from a regulatory standpoint. Tesla's cleared for launch.
Let me focus on that last thing. You're not going to say which is unsupervised. So what is, when they say first half, this status that they show in first half of 26, what does that mean? That they'll just have a car with perhaps a safety attendant in those markets, like 2 or 3 cars with a safety attendant in these markets in the first half of 26? Do you think that's what this is communicating?
I don't know if it's communicating 1 car, 2 cars, 3 cars. What I think, in my opinion, is communicating Tesla's getting ready to expand the Robotaxi service. And it also says to me, Tesla is emerging as the biggest competitor to Waymo. Let's look at the Miami market, for example. I put on my Inspector Clouseau hat and I did some work. I was able to pull building records from Miami-Dade County and was able to uncover the location of Waymo's Miami depot. Uncover the current status. I will tell the audience it is under construction. And here's the interesting thing, Walt. When you and I were in Austin, we visited the Avomo depot, and that was the size of a Costco or maybe a football stadium. That thing was huge. The one in Miami, it only has a permit for 69 spots. And what we also know from the building permit, the energy's not there yet. So is Tesla saying there's a strategic opportunity to go into Miami and gain market share? I don't know, but they're going into markets where Waymo is active or has been planning to go. So it says to me they're getting ready to compete.
69 spots. They're going to need obviously more than that if they really want to service Miami. They talked a big game about as they're launching. They're claiming they're going to have all of the service centers there. I'm not sure. We didn't see it in Austin. They also claim that they've got 500 cars on the market. Obviously, this includes California, where they still have a safety driver sitting behind the wheel there. I'm going to say I think the first half of 26 is basically what it looked like in December in Austin, which, a handful of cars, someone, as a safety attendant, in the passenger seat, if that, and, meaning for the number of markets. Obviously, they don't have a supply issue, but like there's a number of people in operations. That's a lot of markets if you're going to have, drivers to ramp up in the first half of 26. I think to me, that feels like an aggressive milestone for them, given some of the recent performance. But we'll see. And it's, again, more things to hold them accountable for. And we're not going to jam them up, I think, too badly on a 3-week deadline miss here. But, now you've really put the pressure on in terms of the number of markets that they hope to launch on. Bigger issue for me also is just taking Austin to the next level as well. And maybe we'll see that in the coming weeks, getting more fully unsupervised cars on that road so that when we head down there, we'll have no problem getting an unsupervised ride in a Tesla Robotaxi.
Next week, we could get some clarity and insight as Tesla is representative from Tesla is testifying in front of the Senate about autonomous vehicles. So we could perhaps get some clarity there for their plans. That is, perhaps, we do not know. We haven't seen the testimony, but there is a public hearing on that, so perhaps we could. When you look at the amount of vehicles in the market, are you thinking the 30 to 40, 20 to 30? Is this kind of reminiscent of when you and I first went to Austin?
Well, currently, let's do a shout out to David Moss. This guy we hadn't heard about until he drove coast to coast in his Tesla. The guy's a LiDAR salesman, and the amount of information that he was generating while trying to get a driver out, attendant out ride in Austin was phenomenal in terms of also the number of cars, like counting that he was looking at license plates. So there's a lot more cars there than I thought. Obviously, he had to go through 58 rides where there was someone sitting in the attendant seat before he did get that, fully driverless attendant out ride. For the record, he turned around, looked through the window. There was no chase car. That always was, to me, kind of a silly supposition that someone was, remotely driving it from behind the car. I can't imagine just thinking about that technically, how that would make any sense. But whatever. Everyone has a right to their opinion. In this case, David Moss was there. I think he's a pretty credible source from what I can tell. No chase car, and was able to get an attendant out and gave us a better sense of, the amount of cars that they have in the market.
Mr. Moss did a phenomenal job of putting on his journalistic hat. We've got great insights into that, the best insights that we've seen out of Austin. So, Mr. Moss, thank you very much. The other thing that Mr. Moss talked about that you and I spoke about and did a podcast on was he said the vehicles blended in and the motoring public had no idea there was no driver in there. That was a really interesting takeaway that you and I discussed previously.
That was exactly our takeaway when we did our rides down in Austin. And also, I remember reading someone's, post saying like, oh, I was there. I didn't see any Teslas. Like, no shit, because they don't have sensors all over them. Of course you didn't see any Robotaxis there. They blend in. In addition to that, though, again, picking up on what we were talking about last week with my drives to Philly and the sensor cleaning issue, and the same thing that Alex Roy, I think, talked about in terms of his coast-to-coast ride, they've now added cleaning mechanisms on the side and the back sensor, which is new, right? That definitely doesn't exist on my car. So the question is, are these new cars? Is this the new, is this going to be installed on all new cars all new Model Ys coming off the line? Was this an aftermarket, addition? Like, what did you make of that? And by the way, most importantly, can I go back to Tesla at some point and have my car updated so that I can get those little jets for my camera sensors as well.
Going back to Mr. Moss again, he posted close-up photos of the new cleaning things. It looked to me, and I'm not an engineer, but it looked to me, especially with the rear one, that it was not factory, that it was modified. So perhaps during these tests in Austin, Tesla learned something, and that perhaps, and I don't know the timeline, so just hear me out, maybe 3 months, all new Model Ys, and start coming with it. It looked to me that it was not built on day one. It looks like it was updated after. But again, I have no factual stuff to prove that on. I'm just basing that off of a photograph.
And the other issue with this, though, Grayson, is like it's not just replacing a camera. You're gonna need to pipe some plastic tubing to get your cleaner fluid to those locations. So if existing Ys that have already been sold with hardware 4 need to get upfit, with these new camera sensors, that is not, I can't imagine something easy to do. Again, maybe some of our listeners who are experienced in tripping out their cars will have some better sense than I would. And look, if it costs, let's say, just to ballpark it, let's say if I took this to a detailer and said, put this stuff on my car, let's say it costs $500, $1,000 with $100, $200 a month payment for Robotaxi or whatever it is, the payback on that's obviously going to be pretty quick if that's what it takes. But certainly an interesting development that David was able to uncover.
Yeah, I'll just say it this way, Mr. Moss, thanks. It was awesome. You gave us great insight, and I'll say this for Walt and I: we see you in Austin, sir. Lunch is on us when we see you down there.
He doesn't live in Austin. He was just visiting it, like we visited. I was actually, Grayson, gonna warn him because we're familiar that we know there's someone that we've seen flying to Austin and filing complaints, following the Robotaxis around and filing complaints. I was going to warn him to look for the guy in the bushes with the camera. Maybe they wanted to jump out, but I decided that maybe I was not going to do that. But I love to refer back to your Inspector Clouseau of discovering who's actually, where did you find that again? It was the police reports in Austin, where they list who's making these complaints.
See, I've got a magnifying glass to find things now.
We know who you are. We know who you are.
The inspector knows all.
Just a good warning for people to think about the stats when they see these complaints, where they're originating from and maybe what's driving that.
I didn't have to use my inspector glass to find it because it was in the public Austin police records. And furthermore, those police records linked to a YouTube video. I'll leave it at that. So it's out there.
Beyond all that, perhaps the biggest news came after earnings when headlines started to hit about, SpaceX merging with xAI, also thinking about merging with Tesla. And look, my takeaway from this is, as I said, much more in the Lightshed podcast. I've talked about it a little bit here. I was just interviewed on Bloomberg talking about Apple and my concerns about Google and their monopolistic power that they have within the AI realm. This is the new paradigm, right? You have to be these mega companies. So for Tesla to mash it all together, and look, on paper, you're talking about what, $3-4 billion potential enterprise value for this company, with a ton of free cash flow associated with that. A lot of synergies we don't necessarily get into here, but I am all for. And by the way, from a Lightshed perspective, given all the work that we do on the space side of things, on connectivity as well as AI, and with now autonomy, would love to see this mega merger happen. How about you?
I'm all for it. I think it's wonderful, and I want to throw this back to you and ask a hypothetical question from history. Is this the new, if the merger does go through, is this the new GE for the AI years?
I will hope not GE, because I've got my own issues with what GE over the years did to the American economy. But look, this is the new paradigm, right? You have these companies that are effectively unfettered, that they're determined to be monopolistic, and there's no real regulators or even courts that are doing anything to stop it. So in order to compete, you got to be big, and at least for the next 3 years, that seems to be, permitted. So get it done, I guess, when you can get it done. But we'll see what really happens. It might be a subset. It might be nothing at all. But I think there's been some speculation about this historically. Now there's some press reports around it. We'll see what happens. This is all in advance of an expected IPO for SpaceX for next year. And you know, the price talk around that has been, last deal for them was done at like 800 billion. Now they're talking, I think, at least in the press, $1.5 trillion in terms of value. So exciting times in the world of TNT.
I can tell you, the inspector knows where there's smoke, there's fire. And I'm going to give a plug here. We do have inspector shirts now available on the store. And we're going to link to them below. So you can be an inspector. And we always inspect things here because that's what we like to do. And we love to read the fine print. And we got a press release this week, which confirmed a report from the Toronto Global Mail last year. Waabi, the Canadian autonomous trucking company, raised $750 million US. The headline said it was $1 billion, but the dollar amount when you get into it was $750 million. The $250 million being if they accelerate into robotaxis, that comes from Uber. Well, you have an autonomous trucking company here that has not successfully pulled the driver commercial roads publicly, that's pivoting into robotaxis. To me, this reminds me of the good old days when Waymo had Waymo Via, their trucking program, and Aurora had their car program before they both picked a path forward. Am I having deja vu, or is this history repeating itself again?
I mean, you might know more about that history than I do, but I think the more that I've spent with the companies that are focused on autonomy for long haul, you know, these are focused on highway type miles for very large trucks. It's a very difficult and different challenge that they face. But, you know, you're talking about hubs, or even if you go beyond the hub to the ultimate destination, you're basically plotting out an ODD, an operational, what is it? Design domain? What is it? What, ODB, ODD?
ODB. I mean, he was a ODB. Yeah, you know me.
We should license some ODB and play it as our intro music.
We'll have the Autonomy Markets Zoo. Zoo.
Maybe you could say this is like Zooks in Las Vegas, where there's a very limited street that it can actually drive on. This is not how a robotaxi is going to operate in terms of going from point to point anywhere within a city. So I don't know. Maybe, again, Waabi has an end-to-end approach, right? There's not this reliance on maps. So for them to do this versus how Aurora would approach this is obviously very different. Never going to lose an opportunity to bring up the CES 2 ago with the Bigelow battle, which was between Raquel, the CEO of Waabi, and Sterling Anderson, who was formerly at Aurora, now at GM, about this very issue. So maybe Waabi is unique because they have end-to-end, that they can make this pivot. And from Uber's standpoint, like, look, another $250 million to throw in the bucket to try and promote any type of competition possible in that robotaxi market.
But yes, so the press release also said, to clarify, that the plan is to deploy 25,000 Waabi-powered robotaxis with their sensor suite, which we don't know what it looks like, on the Uber network, and we do not have any indication of who the OEM is yet. But Uber's invested in them before with a focus on trucking. Leo Ron, who before ran Uber Freight as CEO, is now COO of Waabi. So, and then Raquel previously was a scientist at ATG. A lot of overlap there, but well, you're an investor, you're an analyst. How do you launch a new business when you haven't gotten the first business to be commercially viable?
When you say commercially viable, it's not like anyone's generating a profit in trucking. So it's early days. So you got to give people a break here, right? Because what's your comparable? I mean, obviously you've got Kodiak generating revenue, you've got Aurora generating revenue, but that field is still wide open. But sometimes this is maybe signal of a pivot where, you know, who knows, you know, if we're going to get into the trucking later with Plus AI, there's a limited number of OEMs. Who knows how close each of the partnerships going to be? Like, who is Volvo going to ultimately partner with? This provides a diversified path. Aurora has a diversified path as well. Toyota, I'm a little skeptical that there's much development going on between the Aurora driver and Toyota, but who knows? So, I mean, companies can walk and chew gum at the same time, especially when you're getting $750 million and now up to $1 billion. to invest in this when you already have, some amount of it of development underway.
But they raised $1.28 billion US to date. It's not going to take you very far. They have an OEM partnership with Volvo. They're building that. You're not going to get to launch two programs for 1.28 billion. I'm sorry. At the end of the day, it's just not going to happen. And not to mention, the Financial Times publicly reported this. The valuation when they raised the 750 million was at a $3 billion valuation.
I'm glad you're so certain, because I'm not certain that $1.3 billion doesn't enable you to develop a program. I mean, how much money has May Mobility invested in their technology? And they're going to be launching a trial, shortly, with cars that are on the road. What is Tesla's increase in their CapEx this year? 10 to 20 billion for that massive company. So I don't know if you always have to associate dollars with success. I'm not sure that it always works that way, especially in the age of AI.
I agree with that, but it's two programs with top tier engineering talent, and there are engineers that are very good at working on trucks. There's engineers very well working on cars, and it's two different skill sets. So you basically are going to have to double the talent pool, and that's going to be very expensive. These engineers are in high demand.
I don't agree that it's two different skill sets. If the whole point of this is end to end, and it's the AI reasoning model where you're not relying on these maps, there's got to be some level of crossover in terms of a unified approach to how they're doing autonomy in the market.
I'll give you that. There is some of that, but I will say this. I'm going to be very curious to see how this evolves over the next 6 months, and it's something we're going to be watching. And the thing that I'm watching in this too, if you're Neuro and Lucid, how are you reacting to this after that beautiful car was introduced at CES?
I don't think they care. Like, Neuro and Lucid have a great partnership with Uber. They're moving forward. They know the market's going to be competitive. Like, you could argue that, the news that came out of Mercedes, where Mercedes is formalizing their S-Class relationship with NVIDIA, and Uber is competition, and they're using NVIDIA as the tech stack when Neuro is using NVIDIA in terms of their compute. Like, they need to keep focused on getting product to the market. That's the only thing that matters to them. If Uber wants to dabble around, they know they're going to want to do that, and it's up for them just to beat the competition and get product on the road. So I don't think they react to the news at all. And again, to go back to Waabi, if we're going to give the benefit of the doubt in terms of Tesla and their ability to not use LiDAR and get a successful product, why should that not extend to Waabi and their ability to take these dollars and to develop a robotaxi program? You have to apply it evenly across whatever company that we're talking about, unless you've got specific knowledge about why you think their technology might not work with that application where it is working for trucks. I don't see how that's possible. Like, yes, they're different, but like I can see that there are similarities. You are trying to autonomously move a vehicle from one location to another.
Trying to autonomously move it, you haven't removed the driver on public roads yet, so you don't have that proof point. It's just, to me, launch one business.
I mean, you can say that about nearly every company in this space. I mean, how many of these competitors still have someone sitting in there as a safety driver? So, they're no different than most of the field.
There is proof points. Aurora removed the driver until PACCAR demanded that the driver go back in, and that was successful. NAPUS built a heck of a safety program there. Bot Auto has removed the driver on a test case. Kodiak is operating every day 24/7 in the Permian, public and private roads. No driver. So that's 3 use cases that are very public in trucks.
So what? So companies are at different stages of their development. Okay. So maybe they haven't reached these milestones that are set by those companies. That doesn't mean they can't move forward on whatever the new project is that they have. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but clearly they got some investment dollars behind, pushing this project forward.
I'll watch. I'll watch. That's what I'll say. It's going to be very interesting to watch to see where this goes. And I still can't figure out Uber's AV strategy, where they want to go. I'll say this for the record. I truly do believe that Uber is going to relaunch ATG in some form, in some fashion, at some point, and the newly announced AV Labs is the first step in that direction.
What is AV Labs? Because I'm not quite certain what it is.
So the way that it's been portrayed to the market, Uber AV Labs is to gather data to help accelerate the development of autonomous vehicles. In that lab, they currently have one vehicle, a Hyundai Ioniq 5, no surprise with that one, that is a test vehicle. And they said publicly in an interview they could add more vehicles to that. It's the early steps of research, of rebuilding potentially ATG and launching their own fleet, because enough time has passed, in my humble opinion, since the incident in Arizona where Uber could successfully relaunch a program.
I mean, that may be the case. I've seen labs put behind a lot of things. The 5G labs, Verizon has a 5G lab, T-Mobile has a 5G lab. They brought Jensen in for the 5G lab or whatever, AI lab that they were doing. And it's just, okay, they're testing technology. It makes it easy for vendors to come in. And look, Uber, you said you didn't know what their strategy is. Their strategy is pretty clear, to try and have as many, AV technology companies succeed out there, so that market is fragmented, so that they have to rely on Uber to supply all the demand for the supply that's getting generated at a much cheaper basis and a much safer basis, more importantly, by these autonomous companies there. So maybe this labs is just to support that. Maybe you're right. Maybe the labs brings in enough intelligent people within the company to be like, hey, we're dealing with NVIDIA. Maybe we can do this ourselves. Or maybe we just buy Neuro and take their tech, because of the 6 or 7 guys that we've invested in, their technology is good. Let's bring it in-house, because some of the others, might not be progressing as fast. So I think it can go any different ways. There's nothing bad about what they're doing, and I don't think it's any major, to me, not necessarily a major change in strategy. To your point earlier, we already, both of us, predicted that if not, implausible, if not possible, if not probable, that a couple years down the road, as the kind of, the winners and losers emerge, maybe in your case, you don't think Waabi makes it, and maybe Neuro does, that they end up owning, whoever the 1 or 2 winners are in the market.
I could see a scenario where Uber buys 2 companies and merges them together to build a program to accelerate that. Another signal that I'm going to look for in the market: do we start to see public messaging from Uber, and do we start to see job hirings around fleet management? Because that issue still has to be solved. No matter how many partners they have, they still have to solve fleet management. So I'm looking for those signs for job hires, for public messaging as well.
Well, maybe the solution to fleet management is just to get rid of it altogether, because it's not really core to the business.
And that's why you're the Walt. And I asked an LLM, I said, who is Walter Piecyk? And it said, a famous Wall Street analyst. So there you go. You gave a very famous answer.
That's not that famous.
You were in New York. I saw you on the videotape. I saw you. See, I got a hat for that. And I have a magnifying glass. And I saw you at the Plus AI Investor Day at NASDAQ in New York. Inspector saw you. What did you learn? What did you think?
I mean, we should have tied this in order-wise, I think, maybe to the Waabi commentary. It was great. It was great to see the management team again. Have obviously met the group before. The new person there for me was the gentleman from International, or Trayton, who they cut this deal with. And, the way the relationship works is like, Plus AI is trying to be this very kind of thin software layer. I think they said the word software about 100 times during the presentation. And that means that they rely on the OEM, in this case, International, to be the sales. So International will then sell the truck to, let's call it JB Hunt or whoever. And JB Hunt will pay a normal price for the truck. I don't know if that's elevated or not. Let's assume it's not. And then they'll pay a residual. So it leaves questions whether JB Hunt, Amazon, whoever is end up buying these trucks from International are going to be willing to pay a residual versus like their normal purchase agreement, which you just buy the truck and then that's it. Now, they obviously are going to save a lot of money, right? Because you've got this autonomy driver, which they're offsetting by what they're paying for the maintenance, which is like the remote driver and things like that. So it's a beautiful business model, with the risk of you have an OEM, you're reliant on the OEM to actually sell it, as opposed to, let's say, Kodiak, where you're basically you're going direct to Atlas or whoever, and you're dealing with the trucks. What's fascinating about all of this is, like, when I talk to the International person, it just doesn't seem like there's an opportunity, at least in their case, for there to be more than one technology partner. I think, again, especially if you're the one selling the trucks into the customer, how are you selling anytime soon, in the next couple of years at least, multiple technology solutions when you're working and putting so much effort in trying to make this stuff work with Plus AI. So it feels like whoever's locked up is locked up, and then that kind of flips to like, who is Volvo locked up with? Does anyone? And if you're locked up with PACCAR, is that the guy you want to be locked up with? If you have someone like, International, who has smaller market share, that is more willing to embrace technology versus PACCAR, that just feels, maybe I could be wrong, but maybe a lot more cautious into moving to this next wave out there for trucking.
So Volvo has public OEM partnerships with Waabi, and they also have a public partnership with Aurora. And if you looked at the Volvo investor decks, you could see that they wanted to basically put any virtual driver on top of the Volvo VNL. That's the dual redundant platform they're building. So you're right.
Is that realistic, though?
At this stage of the game, probably not. In the future, yes.
And so if that's the case, since despite our debate on Waabi before, clearly Aurora's ahead. I mean, and Aurora's had their issues with PACCAR. Are they just locking up Volvo? And is there a way for them to make that relationship exclusive? They probably don't even need to get it written. If they're just really working with them more closely, getting more batches off those lines, by definition, Volvo is going to be much more focused on that Aurora relationship.
Well, not necessarily. The Volvo VNL is not in commercial use yet. It's being tested. It's being built. We're looking most likely, I would assume, a 2027 launch for the VNL platform, because that's when the Daimler dual redundant Cascadia comes off the line. But Aurora needed trucks. They went to International Plus's partner, and they bought trucks off the lot, and they're retrofitting them now. And those are going to be going this year. Driver out, International trucks with the Aurora driver.
Okay, but if you're International, right, and you have this relationship with Plus AI, where they're your partner, and they're generating you, if this is, you're selling it, you're selling this product. You're not just selling a truck to Aurora and Aurora goes and sells it. You're the one that's selling it to the customer. So, and this customer is generating you a recurring revenue stream. That if you're a trucking company, that's great for investors, that you get a higher multiple for recurring revenue stream. Where's your focus going to be? When this goes back up to the CEO or whatever level it is, where's your focus going to be? The guy you're selling these trucks to, or the one where you're literally selling the actual service and getting behind selling this autonomy technology?
It's going to go to the one where you're fully integrated in Plus's case. That's where the attention's going to go, because that's what you're, if you want to use the term, you're making your big bet on Plus, and that's clearly what they're doing. But with this model, who's going to service them?
Well, it depends what servicing you're talking about. But in this case, the way Plus has presented is they are software. Remember, I said software 100 times. It is the OEM. It is, in this case, International, that is taking on the service component, and that's why they're getting paid this annual fee for that service component, including maintaining those remote drivers. By the way, the tie-in financially here also goes to the investment that they made, and they're getting warrants when they hit certain revenue milestones. So there's a lot of incentives there. And again, it's a trucking company. From what I can tell, their market share is smaller than some of the peers that we just talked about. So they're probably more willing to embrace technology in order to take share. By the way, this is probably, if they're successful and Plus is successful with them, this is really great for the industry. Let's not do this as a winners and losers. Because I don't think, no offense to Plus, you're not going to all of a sudden, sign up Volvo or sign up, Daimler or whoever, maybe Daimler, I don't know, but sign up others the next day. But it does put pressure on those OEMs to, accelerate things with their existing technology partners. So, the best friend of Aurora and Bot and others might be for Plus AI to be successful with International.
There's enough pie to go around, and we want everybody to be successful at the end of the day. And I think for the autonomous trucking industry, they want everybody to be successful, because this is not a winner takes all market. It is a highly fragmented market. And when Plus succeeds and Kodiak succeeds and Bot succeeds and Aurora succeeds and Waabi succeeds, it's a win for everybody. It's a good thing, because it sets the narrative that this technology is successful and it's proven to work.
In any event, Plus should be a publicly traded stock shortly, when they, whatever the term is for the SPAC stuff, joining Kodiak and Aurora. So we've got a nice little sector that has evolved for this space. So it's going to be fun, and a lot of great people at all the companies.
Yeah, it's a lot of great people, and we'll see them at Fort Worth in March, and we'll get to talk to them more in person and have some good times. And let's shift to the foreign autonomy desk, because Clouseau noticed something. I noticed something, and I didn't even need my pipe. I have a pipe now to see this. Waymo had a launch party this week in London to announce the Waymo vehicle coming to London. I noticed something. Do you know what I noticed, Walt? The driver was on the left-hand side, not the right-hand side. The inspector saw that. That to me says these vehicles were obviously imported to the UK, probably came out of the Arizona factory. What do you think?
I think that if we're talking about autonomous cars, the location of the driver is irrelevant because there is no driver. That's what I think. But also, I will be headed to the UK in I think the first week of March, somewhere thereabouts. I'm looking forward to try and put on my Inspector Clouseau hat, find some of these Waymos, maybe try and find a Wave. I don't know. Do the Wave cars exist on the road? There apparently was one in Vegas, although I don't think many people got a ride in it. I don't know why you take a car all the way to Vegas and then not show it off to as many people as you can there. But maybe I'll be able to track down, for any of our listeners at Wave, I'm going to be on your home turf. If you're willing to allow someone to kick the tires, basically 100% of your peers have. So I look forward to kicking your tires, or trying to track you down on the streets of London in a couple of weeks.
Yes, they are in London. You can see the vehicle's clearly marked self-driving car, because unfortunately you'll be there in March and Waymo's launching their pilot in April, so you'll miss them by the matter of a few weeks. But we're going to continue to watch the UK market for the Robotaxi deployments. And for our audience, it's very important that you watch the political race that's unfolding in the UK, because that will have a dramatic impact on the future of autonomy in the United Kingdom, because the telco issues that Walt and I have talked about are about to come true if the polls hold the way that they're holding.
Well, hopefully it changes a lot of things about the UK that seem to get sent into my social media reels recently. What else do we have on the foreign autonomy desk?
We also have Pony AI. They have partnered with the Beijing ATBB Travel and Express Service Company to deploy 3,000 robotaxis in the mainland China by the end of the year. Pony's ramping up in China.
Yes, they are. As a Chinese company, they definitely are. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll keep our eye on China, and we'll try and find out what cars are coming out of China. They're trying to sneak their way into the U.S. With that technology. I think that's always a possibility, I guess.
The inspector will be inspecting and paying close attention, because
we will be paying close attention.
Videos show up on X, and there was a video that went. I said, "Oh my God, did the Chinese hack it, or did the person fall asleep?" That video that happened out there in LA. That's where my mind went, because you never know. What we do know, Walt, it was an extremely busy week in the autonomy markets this week. What do we need to look for next week? Is Clouseau is going on the road, and I'm going undercover, and I'm making a video for us next week. But besides that, what else do we need to look for?
You're not going to tell us the location of where you're going to be?
I'm going to 007 Top Secret Land.
Okay. Well, for me, I'm buried in earnings for another week. One of those earnings reports will be our good friends over at Uber. Obviously, we're looking for more information out of Austin. It's certainly important for the industry to see if Tesla, in fact, can ramp up. Obviously, there's a lot of people that think that continue to believe that that's not going to happen. So, we will be here reporting on it every week and not forget about them one little bit.
No, we won't. The future's bright. The future's autonomous. The future is unsupervised. Walt, until next week.